session by Dan, Viet, and Diego. And Viet, I think you will introduce yourselves, okay?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Vreeman. Thank you all for being with us here in person and online. Our hope with this session is to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing in the Standards Implementation Division. We are here for you. So we're really glad you're here, and we want to hear more from you as well. So I'm Viet Nguyen, the new Chief Standards Implementation Officer. I'm here with Diego, the Deputy Standards Implementation Officer, and I'm going to have Dan Vreeman come up and just spend just a few minutes to talk about HL7, because we're not always sure if folks kind of grounded on HL7, and we want to demonstrate that we're all just a team. We're not dividing up people, we're just divvying up the work. So Dan, please come up. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I too want to say welcome. Glad to see all of you, and it's fun to be back in person. I'm the Chief Standards Development Officer, and what I wanted to do was just give a quick orientation. I know many of you are pretty actively involved in the standards development side of FHIR, but many of you are also more on the implementation side, making FHIR real in applications. So a little bit about what HL7 as an organization is. We're a nonprofit. Started many years ago in 87, ANSI accredited. And our purpose is to gather and convene people who want to get together to work on solving interoperability problems by developing specifications that can be used for exchange of health data. And the standards that HL7 produces typically fall into three main categories. Our existing sort of legendary status standard version 2, CDA, a document-based exchange standard, and of course FHIR, which is the reason that we're all here. HL7 is a global organization with thousands of individuals participating and contributing to making the specifications that we produce. Here you can see sort of the map of our global reach, and I recognize actually we have to update this with adding color to Mexico and Colombia, our newest affiliate members. But HL7's effort really is an international one. So in the process of developing specifications, you can think of projects that start out as community gatherings of people wanting to work together to solve a problem, and eventually at the other end of that spectrum becomes a published specification. But what we're going to talk with you about today is how there's really a continuum, there's really a loop, a feedback loop, actually multiple feedback loops are along that journey, that it's crucially important to have implementer feedback and input into the process. And our goal in the envisioning effort at HL7 that produced these kind of two divisions, one for standards, focusing on standards development, and the other focusing on implementation, was to help build these sort of virtuous feedback loops better and stronger than we have in the past. On this image, which is maybe the words aren't necessarily legible from the back of the room, but you might be able to see the colors. The blue boxes of the sort of phases of the life cycle indicate parts of that have a little bit more implementer focus, meaning the contributions to the process are more heavily coming from the implementer community, whereas the mustard yellow color ones are the parts of the phases of the process that are traditional standards development, sort of developing the spec, balloting, publishing, et cetera. And the green areas are those that really represent kind of a mixed sort of arterial venous blood kind of situation, you know, where there's sort of a commonality between the implementation and standards development activities. And so our goal is to develop processes that seamlessly interact sort of amongst these kinds of things. And that's what you're going to hear more about from Viet and Diego, is the ways in which these new activities that are more squarely focused on the implementation side really interweave with the standards development activity. And from now, I'll pass this over to Viet, who will tell why and how this is all coming about.
Thanks, Dan. If those of you who have seen presentations by me in the past and by Chuck Jaffe, you might have seen this timeline. We've tried to extend the timeline beyond up to this year and next year, because there's been a lot of activity. I'm not going to go through every step, but the key here is that we want to make sure the community, and hopefully you can reinforce this, is that FHIR is not new. we're now in our 11th year. And that we're at a point where we need to be able to scale fire and to grow fire. And that I usually remind the US audience that this December 31st date this year is going to be really important for us because of the Cures Act and the adoption of Fire R4, US Core 3.1.1, SMART, US CDI, and OpenID. And if I said that too fast, we'll find some links for you. But that really helps the community understand that this is the puck we're all skating to, at least in the US, but I would say internationally as well. And with the last 11 years, there's been a lot of activity in the growth of fire. And one representation of that growth is the accelerator program. And I am the technical director of the Da Vinci project and have brought in some of that experience of the established accelerator programs to help the new accelerators and new communities that want to come into HL7 and do work, but they're not necessarily standards developers. But this is an example of the growth of the HL7 and the fire community and trying to find opportunities to improve healthcare interoperability. But really, what happened over at the beginning, starting at the beginning of the pandemic, was this realization, and I'll give a lot of credit to Walter Suarez, our chair at the time, and Chuck Jaffe, our CEO, to really take the opportunity, if we had, because we had it, to say, what are we going to be when we come out of this pandemic? And I think we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel coming out of the pandemic. And we knew that we would have a different paradigm in healthcare, and what is HL7's role in that? And they initiated the re-envisioning process, and now we're enacting all these things from the re-envisioning recommendations, and they're really focused on focusing our efforts around fire while still recognizing the significant implementation base of V2 and CDA and V3. We want to be more agile, be responsive to the community, increase our global relevance because, of course, pandemics are global. And so grow our international community, or international to the US, but international in general. Diego always reminds me of that. Make all our programs sustainable. And that's really important. We don't just create specifications and then let them grow. I like to think of what happens when you have kids and teenagers and you send them out to the community, but they always have a home they can come back to, but they often develop their own support network. But really from this, we want to focus on what are the community's needs. And we've recognized that we've been supporting implementers for a long time. It just really wasn't as formalized as we really wanted to. So from that, the implementation division was envisioned and enabled to really help close this chasm between what we've done in the past with kind of static specifications, a fairly small community of standards developers who are also implementers. We have to recognize that developers are all the implementers, but just like we have a job hat, a spouse hat, or a parent hat, or a friend hat, it depends on which hat that we're wearing that we focus our activities. So we want to recognize that these static specifications we've developed in the past have evolved and become the HTML-based open source fire specifications, and that we can improve our ability to help the implementer community in adopting those specifications. I think it's gotten better because they're open source, and I think picking them up isn't so hard, but actually implementing them can be challenging. And so we want to figure out how we do that better. And the way we've done it is to establish kind of some value propositions, a set of programs. And this is the takeaway I really hope you all get, because often people ask us, what does this implementation division do? Think of these as these 5 areas that we're focusing on: program management, community outreach, best practices, and ecosystem and education. Many of these things we're already doing, but really with this implementation program management is really learning from what we've learned from the accelerators over the past 4 years to help new communities. And what we've done is really helping the Helios and the FAST community to grow. But we recognize that these are sometimes US-centric, but there are going to be global groups that want to engage in HL7 who have subject matter expertise, who have their own workflows they want to support, and we want a way for them to engage. So I think of us as the customer service arm of HL7. We want to increase the opportunities to engage the community and inform, as well as get feedback through events like DevDays and others. We want to develop best practice programs as well as documentation, and we've already started on some of that, so that we get you closer to what you're going to do in the last mile so that you can learn from what others have learned in terms of architecture or terminology and things like that. And then we're really excited because we want to expand this notion of doing reference implementations. I hear very frequently from the developers that just getting one version of a representation of the implementation guide is really helpful. And we know from core Fire that all the reference implementations like Happy or Vonk or Graham Server has really helped the implementer community understand how Fire works. That's for core Fire, but as we develop implementation guides that look at workflows, we want to be able to have reference implementations to represent those as well. And of course, we want to increase and grow or expand our education program, not only what's being offered, but how we can partner with the community to make the channels for Fire education even better and closer, and to make them more custom to the kind of audiences we have, whether they be developers or others. And so we are working with the Education Advisory Committee and the community to develop those as well. But really, we want to take this holistic approach. It's not one role, it's not one thing, it's not one community. It's all of us coming together and using our expertise to kind of focus our attention on areas that we can accelerate the adoption of Fire and make it easier for you all in whatever role you have, whether you're an executive, a manager, an analyst, developer, architect. We want to find out what you need and how we can do this better. So what I'd like to do next is really to hand it off to my friend and colleague, Diego, who will talk a little about what we've done as since we started in January. So Diego.
Thank you, Viet. I'm the devil because I'm in the details. So I will try to show you the details of what we are trying to do. So the first thing is about education. We are moving forward the 3 programs. The certified education provider is already in place. You can enter the site and follow the rules to become a certified education provider. The other 2 are the credentialing program. So we need to create the job descriptions and the syllabus before creating the actual tests. And we are in the process of creating the job descriptions and the syllabus and the business plan for next year, and also trying to get new providers for the test, because our current provider only supports multiple choice, and we want to test actual skills, and multiple choice answering is not a skill. 5 minutes, I just begun. Perfect, I will be fast. Yeah. And then on partnering, we are defining the rules of engagement. What are you partnering from? Who are you, and what you can provide in education, marketing, actual content, and whatever, and maybe creating the rules and piloting some agreements. About the credentialing, we created 2 different formats. One is just one exam that will be complement the one that we already have, which is the certified proficiency in Fire. We are trying to add 2 more, technical and non-technical. The details are in each point of this slide, but we cannot cover them. But we also are trying to find out if we want to do a more granular certification on different roles. And maybe we will send you a survey on which role you think you are covering and what you be interested in being certified on, or your people being certified on, to find out if this is a better approach to certification. It's called micro certification. You can do specific topics or subjects or specific roles in a company. Like entry level is what we already have, but we also can certify them being an architect, a developer, informatician, not technical, or even a profiler. So we will send you maybe tomorrow a survey. And the last thing I can cover, I think, is the Fire Foundry, which is the ecosystem. And our plan is first to get the current Logica Sandbox transferred to HS7, which are the Salmon boxes, and then add the capability to implement the reference implementations in only one place so we can all access them and run them, because today you have to download the reference implementation and make it run in your own environment. And we want to have a continuous integration and development and deployment cycle inside of one place that everyone can access and test. And in the future, maybe your own implementations can live inside of the Foundry. So this is our timeline. This year we are trying to get, it's not easy, we are trying to get the Logica Sandbox transferred to HL7 and some of the existing reference implementation being available. And then we want to create some way for you to discover 1 minute the implementation guides in a user-friendly way, so that you can discover, not being a developer yourself, maybe even being an end user, being able to discover a client for your use case and testing it. And then we are trying to create a group of special events. The first one is Fire in the Sky with Clouds. I will pilot that in September, which is how to do the same basic chores with different cloud offerings, because we are doing the same things usually. So how to do that with this specific vendor or this other vendor, the same thing. So that's a review, impartial review of what to do and what are the common chores we do and how to do them with Fire. The same for data science. We are trying to get the community of research and data science into our radar and create these events for them, one for cybersecurity and one for patient empowerment. So if you are interested in any of these, you can drop me an email.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Diego. We have a few minutes left for questions. Is there anyone in the room? I already have a question here on the Q&A. Anyone? Okay, just a sec. Mario.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Viet. Thank you, Diego. One of the things that we see in the implementation community right now is a drive around version management, version information exchange, and then ultimately, and Viet, you driving some of this with respect to seeing multiple IGs being stitched into workflows. So when we talk about ecosystems, are we talking more towards an integrated ecosystem where we're actually seeing multiple organizations with different roles? And are you considering, when you're looking at testing, how to choreograph these multiple IGs? Because it's not just one organization doing it. You're talking about multiple organizations, multiple actors, and some of these tests are complex.
Yeah, so I agree with you. And Graham gave a great talk earlier today about the challenges of that. We want to do our best as the community starts to sort out how we enable or address the multiple versioning, multiple profiles thing. We want to represent it in the ecosystem at a baseline. What is it in a well-controlled environment with reference implementations for different representing different stakeholders? And then from there, I think we have to learn, because I don't know that there are answers to that complexity quite yet, but we want to be able to both support the standards part. So when those best practices or guidance comes from the standard side of the house and the community, we implement them, we use that to test, and then we get the feedback from the organizations who utilize it.
Thank you. Here's a question from Janice Karen. One issue I have with many Da Vinci and similar presentations is that they're too high level and they hide the API's data specifications. When I first started, it was really hard to bridge the gap from knowledgeable API person to understanding Fire, because there was either an assumption of being non-technical or already knowing the technical details. Do you have ideas on how to bridge this gap? So actually someone who's asking about the chasm.
Yes, and I think the chasm is closed by all of us. As an informaticist, those of you who have talked to me, I can talk to an executive, I can talk to a clinician, I can talk to a developer, but depending on the conversation, I'm probably not the expert in the conversation, but I help to bridge those conversations between the developers and the analysts and the clinicians and the executives. So we look to you all as developers to understand that deep technical, but to work with the analysts who help bridge that gap between understanding what the policy implications are to what the workflows are within the stakeholder community, what your organization provides in terms of technology, and then how that gets translated in the technology stack of FHIR. So it takes all of us to close that chasm, and our hope is to close the chasm in terms of knowledge and understanding of FHIR and how it's being used. But in the real world, it'll be you all. Diego?
I have an opinion on that, and what I see, because one of my job is to educate people in FHIR standards and how to read an implementation guide. And what we discovered, because in one of my cycles, I teach FHIR day one, day two, the basics, and day three, you are forced to read the IG and understand it and explain it to me and the other students, and they don't understand. And that's our responsibility. We need to make them understand, and maybe the text is not enough, and we need to create Postman collections, and we need to make the text understandable for non-technical people to understand what is in for them as business analysts, as patients. So I already told this to Graham, and we already prepared a part of the implementation guide which is readable for humans. Like the barcode has something, so someone can actually read that and understand it. But in fact, we need to make our IGs better. I've been through all the public health IGs, for instance, and sometimes I didn't understand. And I've been there for years. So how can we ask a person that began last month to understand it?
Okay, Diego, thank you very much. We're already on time, sorry. Tomorrow, there's another opportunity to meet these three wonderful gentlemen during the opening session tomorrow morning. Thank you all for joining, and see you at the next session.